8,000-metre mountains are famous for their dramatic stories of death at high altitude. But on the night of the 22nd of June, 2013, death came to Nanga Parbat in Pakistan, the world's 9th highest peak, in a way that no one could have anticipated. Over a dozen terrorists entered base camp, disguised as members of the local paramilitary force. By the time they left, 10 foreign climbers and a local cook were dead. It was at around 10 p.m. that night that the attack began. Zhang Jinchuan, a Chinese mountaineer who survived, described what happened. The incursion had been sudden, but he had managed to make a run for it, dodging gunfire in the process, before diving into a trench, where he remained for nearly an hour. Returning to camp when it was safe to do so, he called the police on a satellite phone, then retreated up the mountain in case of further attacks. A helicopter then arrived at 7 a.m. the following morning. Another survivor, Pakistani climber Sher Khan, described what happened in camp. The climbers were robbed of their money, radios and phones, then forced to turn their backs, before being shot. Making up the dead were 3 Ukrainians, 2 Slovakians, 2 Chinese, and 1 Chinese-American dual national, a Lithuanian, a Nepali guide, and a local man. Within that group were several notable climbers. Ivor Sverhun, the team leader, had climbed 6 8,000ers, while the Chinese, Chunfeng Jiang and Janfeng Rao, had climbed 11 and 10 respectively. The attackers had identified themselves as both Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and as they left, were heard to shout Allahu Akbar and slogans in memory of Osama bin Laden. Gilgit-Baltistan, the Pakistani region in which Nanga Parbat is located, had previously been considered free from Islamic militancy, apart from a few internecine attacks on the minority Shia population. The Pakistani Taliban claimed responsibility the day afterwards, describing it as a retaliation for a May 2013 US drone strike in which Pakistani Taliban commander Wali-ur-Rahman had been killed. Yet another militant group, Jundala, also claimed responsibility. Later intelligence further clouded the motives for the attack. It indicated that the perpetrators planned to kidnap the Chinese-American dual national Chen Hinglu and hold him for ransom. However, Chen was a martial arts practitioner, and after fighting off his would-be kidnappers, one of them panicked and shot him. With the main objective now impossible, the terrorists decided to go for just a straight robbery and massacre instead. There's lots more to come in this video, but please consider liking, subscribing to the channel and sharing. And please consider supporting my work with a PayPal donation. The link is in the description. Thank you. The Interior Minister of Pakistan, Nizar Ali Khan, announced an inquiry along with a suspension of local law enforcement officials for failure to protect the climbers. Shortly after an investigation was launched, 37 suspects were arrested from villages near Nanga Parbat. Most of them were porters, assisting the climbing expedition, and while none were involved in the attack, valuable information was obtained from them before they were released. This led to 16 attackers being identified. The men were local, and while not being immediately linked to the Pakistani Taliban, it emerged that they had received training 760 kilometers away, in the so-called tribal areas, a known hotbed of Islamic extremism. Across June and July, police were able to track down and arrest 4 of the 16 men, but in August, the Pakistani Taliban attacked a car containing high-ranking security officials involved in the investigation, killing 3 of them. The government responded by sending in the army. Crackdowns and checkpoints ensued, and it was reported that by the 19th of that month, 20 men who had been involved in the attack were now in custody. However, by June of 2014, only 5 of those suspects remained in detention. Militant sources claimed that one of the men was involved, whilst the 4 others had been forced to confess under interrogation. On the 27th of February 2015, 2 of the men still being held escaped in a jailbreak. Since that time, no updates on the case seem to have been forthcoming. Details are sketchy, and it appears that the Pakistani authorities, without any prospect of conviction, and still embarrassed by the attack, have decided to let the matter slowly fade away. It seems unlikely that justice will ever be served. Thankfully, there have been no further attacks on high-altitude climbers in the area. But it is a bitter irony that men who had almost daily diced with death on the world's most challenging peaks would die without their climbing boots on, at the hands of men rather than the peaks of mountains.